and then we can catch them up, I guess. So this is what people received explicitly in compensation for sex. Dark purple, the biggest mark there is, I think it's small romantic gifts, flowers and sweets, and that's interesting as well that people interpret this as an explicit exchange and not a pure gift.
You mean the blue that?
The dark. Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. That's the biggest one. People who have reported they've never done it. Yeah, and that's extremely important. So only 30% have reported that they have. Blue, never done it. Dark purple, flowers. This pink one that's 9.9% is dinner in a restaurant, and then you have it pretty evenly divided across various ones. Like, well, it's quite surprising how high the monetary gift is, 7%. A gift in monetary form for personal needs. Monetary payment is also there, 2%.
Can I just clarify once again how was exactly the question formulated? Once
Yeah.
again, just for
this question, have you ever received any of the following items explicitly in exchange for sex? And then many items were listed, and then there was also an other category. Yeah.
Understand explicitly in exchange.
Sorry?
How to understand explicitly in exchange? So it was mentioned.
Have you? Yeah, we had a list of items that they could check, and of course the first on the list was I've never exchanged anything for sex, and that's what 70% answered. And that's important to note actually. So actually these 30% could have checked multiple items. And that's something we haven't analyzed yet, like which items kind of go together. Yeah. And it was, I think we used, I mean, I don't have the Russian version here, so I don't want to lie and say what exactly it was, but yeah, it was in exchange. And as opposed to the other question which came before, have you ever received any of these gifts with nothing expected in exchange? And this is the opposite, okay. So, yeah, and again, the people who checked something, they could have checked multiple boxes. Okay, and this is what people have given. So naturally, of course, it adds up a little bit. 66% say they've never given anything in exchange for sex. By the way, the tourist trip, look how big the tourist trip is, 20%. This is another phenomenon that Irina Vorobyova has looked at in her thesis as well. But anyways, you can find this on these online websites as well. You check where you would like to go and how you'd like the material exchange to be, and they'll list, 100 faces of men and women who are willing to fill this role. So it's interesting.
But I'm sorry, can we go back?
Sure.
Is there any item like money?
Yeah, sure.
Where is it? Money payment.
Gift in monetary form is orange, 5%.
And money
and
payment.
Monetary payment is even higher, 7%.
So about 10%.
Yeah.
11,
Even 12, even 12%
12,
here.
okay.
But again, this is very city specific, and you could see that later on when we break it down. We showed it.
But it's an average here, right?
This is all 3 cities, exactly. This is all 3 cities, and so it's a bit different if you look at Moscow. It's and the types of gifts given change a bit too. Okay, and so now we move to our logistic regressions. Who is receiving? Who's more likely to receive, and who's more likely to give? I'll first give you the sort of qualitative explanation, then I'll show you the fancy table later for those of you who prefer fancy tables. Basically, those who are receiving gifts are those who are older. Those who are, of course, women are about 5 times more likely to receive than men, of lower education, but of higher personal income. And this is interesting, and we're unsure whether this means people are raising their income through this type of exchange, or whether people of higher income are more likely to do this in order to maintain a higher level of consumption, for example. It's people that value family more, which is interesting. Okay, people who've been in longer relationships, they've also had more one-night stands, so you could argue that in this case sexual liberalization matches with this type of materialism. They think that financial issues are important when choosing a partner, and they're more often to use dating websites. And one of the interesting things we just found is those who have no father who reported have no father during my childhood are almost 3 times as likely to have engaged in something like this. And we don't know if that's because lack of father figure or poor gender role models, or if it was because of poverty. We do have a question that asked about material level of wealth during childhood, and we're currently analyzing that to see if it interferes, and perhaps that's the real explanation. But it's interesting anyway.
Can I ask
Yeah, sure.
just one more clarification question about, can you repeat it once again? Why do you put higher personal income and value family?
Why do we what?
Why do you put here, like, why do you expect that these variables will have positive or positive meaning, yes? For higher personal income.
You mean you want an explanation of some of these? Particularly which ones are you most interested in?
Higher personal income.
We don't
Just
know.
once again,
We
just
don't know. We
clarify.
don't know if it's the chicken or the egg. Yeah. So we don't know if people of higher income are more materialistic and they therefore choose this type of behavior, or we don't know if people that are poor engage in this type of behavior in order to reach a higher standard of living. And it's important here that the income question is, it's not objective income, it's rather this question that is often used in Russia, like, I can afford an apartment, I can afford a car, I'm getting by, but I can't afford an apartment.
But this is only for receiving gifts.
This is receiving, only receiving.
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
Yes.
Okay, and about what value family?
The explanation there is that, well, according to some theory, especially some of this Marxist feminist theory, marriage is not so different from compensated dating anyways. And so the idea is that maybe some of these women are looking for long-term partners, and sometimes sponsor relationships lead into marriages. Or at least this might be the hope that they have. Whether or not it's actualized is a completely different question. Yeah, but this was a surprise to us, but it actually does match with some literature. This is the same information looked at using fancy, like, whatever, logistic regression tables. The yellow ones are... Is it possible to move that little
I'll try to do that.
window up top just
Yeah.
to squeeze it to the side?
Yeah.
Yellow means significant. It's the same results that you just saw, but you can see the scale here. And of course, no father is very big. It means there weren't a lot of people who reported no father, but those who did, 3 times more likely.
Just can we stop for 1 minute
Yeah.
to rest?
Yeah, please take a look here. And if you want to know the scaling of any of the questions, I might remember.
And sex, so how was it called? 0 was female or 0 is man?
1 is man, so this
1
means
is man.
female. Yeah, female. And if you invert it, it's about 4 or 5 times higher likelihood for women. But you'll see something even more surprising in the next slide.
No father is the biggest. Or
Yeah.
you use dating websites. I don't know.
Well,
Yeah.
of course,
No father.
besides sex, no father was a huge one, but financial issues and dating websites, I think, were quite big as well.
I don't know the sex.
Yeah.
What does it mean, number of one-night stands, once again?
It's literally how many one-night stands have you had in your lifetime, and it's just a raw number. So this means for every additional one-night stand, the chance goes up by 1.5%. Yeah.
Age, it's not so high.
Yeah, but if you
Okay.
but it's by 1 year. It's by 1 year increments, so that's important. So actually, a person who's 10 years older has, is it 37%? Yeah, 37% higher likelihood. Yeah, age was in fact quite a big factor there as well. Yeah, and again, these are receiving.
And the duration of the longest relationship?
This is in months. This is in months.
Oh, yeah.
So every additional month of the longest relationship that a person has ever had. Yeah, I don't have a great interpretation for that.
But there's no mother. It's,
Yeah, that one was not significant at all.
but it's very big number here.
Yeah, but it's but significance level is
Yeah.
So we
What,
can't trust it
once
necessarily.
again, using dating websites, how was it measured? Do you
A
usually use
simple
or?
self-reporting. If you use it, I think it was a 1 to 4 scale, and a higher number here means use it all the time. 0, I think, it means never use it. Oh, okay, we're back. Hey.
So written on
Um, probably what would make sense, I just covered the last slide again, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
this is the most important, the logistic
Yeah.
regression results. This here is results of likelihood of of people receiving gifts explicitly in exchange for sex. These are the people that were most likely. People of older age, women, lower education, higher income, who are more highly valuing family, who have had longer relationships and more one-night stands, who think that financial issues are important when choosing, this is an important thing when choosing a partner. They've more often used dating websites, and those with no father, whether it's because of different gender norms or because they were poor when they were younger, are about 3 times as likely. This is the same information using the logistic regression table outcome. I guess we could go to the next slide. We can come back if there's a question about this. Okay, so then this is the other model that we looked at, predicting those who are more likely to have, at any point in their life, given any gifts explicitly in exchange for sex. Not any gifts. Again, remember, we kicked out dinner and we kicked out romantic gifts because there were just lots of people who said they used those, and we wanted to look at a different gift form. However, if it's important, if you add dinner and if you add romantic gifts, the basic factors that explain this behavior don't change much. So this is something to consider. Okay, those who are more likely to have given gifts: older men from Moscow. No, not from Moscow, living in Moscow, because we also had a variable whether they're from Moscow or not. Living in Moscow, of higher personal income. Financial issues are also more important when choosing a partner. They think that men should be paying on dates. So this is, again, this very traditional gender ideals that the man should pay, the man should take care of the partner. And that's why it's not maybe, it shouldn't be wildly surprising that people with a high valuation of family were more likely to receive these types of gifts. Maybe it's not so far from certain types of marriage, gendered marriage after all. One surprising outcome is that non-heterosexuals were much more likely to have done this. We didn't have a lot in the sample, we only had a few, but those that we found were much more likely to have given gifts in exchange for sex.
Receiving.
Not for receiving, but for giving. The same information using in table form, just for you to get a look. Remember I said women were about 4 or 5 times more likely to receive gifts. To compare, it's interesting to note that men are 12 times as more likely to have given. So this is driven by male giving much more than it's driven by, say, female receiving. And here's what we can see this probably by looking at the non-heterosexuality variable as well. It's also non-heterosexual men, presumably, that are giving gifts in order to ease over relationships as well. Moscow residents 3 times more likely. Income is important, in these traditional gender norms as well. So I'll give a moment just to look at that. Sorry, St. Petersburg, we can't see you now, so if there's questions on the scaling, we can come back to them in the question and answer session. So, yeah. Should we go to the next slide? Okay. A few other statistics. So I also wanted to compare cities, Moscow, Minsk, Kiev, and we can find, I just took three gifts: luxury gifts, dinner, monetary payments, and we find that generally, Minsk is in every case less than Moscow, and Moscow in most cases has much higher percentages of people engaging in this, particularly in monetary payment, but even in dinner as well. For some reason, luxury gifts were more, which is interesting, were higher in Kiev. These are just some basic percentage breakdowns. To summarize.
Significant, the difference.
I think they are. We ran chi-squared tests on, or I think ANOVA actually. We ran ANOVA.
In luxury, dinner, and items.
If I'm not mistaken, it's the differences between Moscow and Minsk are always significant. But I would have to double check on that. To summarize the findings, then this is mainly driven by older and wealthier Moscow men with very traditional patriarchal gender attitudes who yes, in other ways are also sexually liberalized with more sexual partners, and they've had more one-night stands in their lives. And the women who appear, or the people who seem to be involved, it seems to be more often women, and they're maintaining a high lifestyle through this activity as well. Traditional roles, traditional gender roles are important. People thinking that men should give. Of course, that's linked to status demonstration as well. Dating websites were important for receiving, but not for giving. There's a number of factors why the internet might play a role here. Of course, it's more anonymous. Naturally, there's no fear of judgment and publicity there. It's quite efficient in the way that the process works. Generally, it's men, or let's not say men. Let's say it's givers looking for receivers. The receivers set up a profile which gives some sort of direct or indirect signal that they're willing to receive gifts for sex. And men are then sort of fishing through these, and then we'll launch an offer. And some of our researchers also kind of went undercover in this way in order to see how these negotiations actually work up into a certain point. And so internet is efficient as well. And third, there's a normalization factor, because a lot of the websites that are doing this also have many different varieties of dating. People looking for marriage, there's explicit commercial sex, there's compensated dating, there's people looking for all different types of stuff. So it all blends in. Values, in the end, the only significant value outcome was the importance of family for predicting who's likely to receive gifts for sex. But it's also important to note here that in early models, if you look at materialism and self-expression, these predict giving. So people who are more individualized or individualistic, let's say, are more likely to give gifts for sex. But this disappears once we add what city are you living in. In other words, once we throw Moscow into the mix, these values kind of go away. So it suggests that the Moscow environment might lead to certain types of individualized values, which might lead to certain types of compensated dating behavior. At least this is one way that we might explain it. It's definitely more than a niche practice. It's at least 30% of the people that we surveyed, again, between the ages of 18 and 55, and we have to correct for this using our weightings. But keep in mind that the populations in these societies they're growing older. And so once we correct these for weightings, the numbers will probably go up, honestly. Yeah, because our models also showed older people are more likely to be engaging in this, right? Okay. Right, and we found the connection here as well to family values, and other qualitative work shows that these types of exchanges don't exclude emotions or intimacy or romance. Sometimes they actually help. And what I mean by that is in the qualitative work that we did, we found particularly there's something interesting about the gift barter. There's two sides to this. There's the gift part. Gifts are symbolic, and when you give someone a gift, it means you care for them. So a gift can symbolize care, it can symbolize love, it can symbolize romance. But at the same time, if you make it contractual or as a barter, it's a way to bring that kind of stuff onto the marketplace. So it's important to realize that these aren't, I guess as Viviana Zelitzer would say, these are not hostile worlds. In fact, compensated dating might have a nice way of, not a nice way, I mean, by nice I mean efficient. It might efficiently bring emotions into the marketplace. And one of the interesting findings, again, is the Moscow effect. In every case, Moscow has much more compensated dating than Minsk, for example, and this to us is meaningful because we suggest it's related to a lot of wealth and a lot of developed capitalist economic culture as well. It's not only money, it's also has to deal with consumption and luxury cultures and how these start to blend with the liberalization of sexuality at large. So again, to zoom out, and you might also think that this, by now I'm also thinking that the sexual revolution theoretical frame, maybe it's not necessary, maybe it's distracting, but liberalization of sexual activity in Eastern Europe is strongly linked to development of economic culture, and this is in opposition to other sexual revolutions that we've had in the past that I talked about earlier. So instead of the price of the body becoming removed with this type of so-called sexual revolution, in fact, here the price of the body just goes up. And you have qualitative comments about, like, from women who are engaged in these practices as well, You can find this in the discourse, and we found this both in their dating websites, online, and also in interviews. Igor Kohn also reports in interviews from the early 1990s when women say, hey, women of Kazan, we're being exploited. We need to respond to this by raising our price. Don't give it up for free. And you can find exactly these words. And you can find exactly these words today on internet fora as well. Women who are engaged in this say this is a way to empower themselves and resist men who are exploiting them for sex, and so they need to get something in return. And so the logic is interesting, and the logic is different than that of sort of Marxist reject all the economic logic, right? Okay. I guess that's it, and very happy for your comments.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
And now we give the floor to Tatiana Kravchuk with the discussion. Tatiana, thank you.
First of all, I would like to start with maybe questions.
Okay.
Of course, the first question: how did you do the sample first? Because it was not so much clear. I mean, exactly how do you pick up the people in these three cities?
Okay.
How was it organized? And because otherwise you cannot be explicitly well explain the results.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, it's through a large Moscow online panel company, I guess, which uses their panel in order for various marketing and also scientific reasons. And they recruit members of the panel through the internet. Of course, it's an internet panel, right? So from various websites and marketing sites and consumer sites, and also dating websites as well is one of them. And they recruit people based on them meeting certain criteria, so that the overall result is one that is representative in terms of various categories to the overall population. That's the first step. That's how the panel gathers their people.
What do you mean by panel?
The company that manages the panel.
So the same people are asked?
They ask the same people over and over again different types of questions, and they kick people out when they discover that people are cheating or only trying to do it for money or something like this, right? Okay, so this is how they kind of maintain their panel. We looked at their panel, and we looked at it across different age and income and educational and gender characteristics, and determined that it was in fact pretty representative if you look at the population at large. And then we told them, okay, we want a random sample of half men, half women, half older, half younger in these three cities. And that's basically it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Then maybe I have comments, have questions.
Okay.
It's just so first of all, I like the style and the paper very much, and thank you very much for a very interesting topic. And I think it is really exciting and interesting for everybody here. And first, what I will start with minor things that I think that would help your paper to be more attractive or something. You need to place the data sources for the figures, I mean, to make them more clear, and especially when you put these nice diagrams, like here. I think that it will be better to place the labels exactly opposite to the figures, not here, because you cannot differentiate which segment is what.
Absolutely.
So I mean, just opposite the figure, put the label. It will be helpful. Then I would like to say about this statement about free love, that you am I right to understand that you got the result that you do not find much how to say it, many people who would say that they would like to have they have positive attitudes towards free love. Yes, because you stated that it is rejected, that you do not have, do not find.
Have free love, exactly.
Actually, I wanted to relate to the yesterday's Zadorin presentations about values of families in Russia, and they got the same result.
Which presentation?
They did the project on values of families, of family values in Russia, and especially they looked at how does it presented in mass media. But what they get...
And did you say Levada?
Huh?
Which center presented this?
Tsirkon.
Oh,
Zadorin.
okay, Tsirkon, yeah.
Okay, we can talk more about this, but it is really interesting because this is actually the same result they got. Then about the sample. The sample is also okay to my mind, but the only one thing that you should care here, I mean, to make it explicitly somewhere, the statement that you are not extrapolating the results on the total sample. It's not representative for Moscow because it's only the users of the internet. This is you said, but again and again, just don't mix up the things when you are speaking about results. Because when you are speaking about results, you should always be careful and saying that it was only on the people who are really frequently using internet or whatever, especially if you look at the education that you said it's 64% of people who have higher education there. Certainly this is not the same percentage for even Moscow, because in Moscow there are much more people who have lower than higher education, and you need to keep it in mind as well. Then about how wide is the spread of compensated dating. Actually, you said that at some point you exclude the restaurants and romantic gifts, but at the same time at some point in some tables you are showing these figures, so it's a bit what?
No, you're right. I put it in a descriptive table later on.
Yeah. But I mean, to some, you should point it very clearly where you have it or where you do not have it. Maybe at the footnote at the table, because otherwise it's not so clear. If you do not say it while the presentation, it will not be clear. I mean, then about another thing about this main question that you ask in the questionnaire about the whether you have experience of giving or not giving something for exchange for sex. I think that it would be a great idea to put the formulation of this question as a footnote exactly when you
it's there.
I didn't.
It's there for sure. Yeah, it's in the endnotes. Yeah.
Maybe.
But the endnotes are at the very end, and it could have been easy to miss it.
But maybe.
Maybe it should have been in the main text. Yeah, we have it
like
in Russian.
Like when you look first at these tables, so I mean just under them. Then I had some more. I didn't get it quite well about the hypothesis. I would be very careful in formulating it, because I would say if you wanted to test the income, for example, and you are not making a special assumption, because when I asked you about why you did put higher personal income in the giving, receiving, so it means that you should have one hypothesis. If people are poor, they would accept more.
Well, I do have a hypothesis, but we ultimately don't know what the.
But I'm just asking about careful and accurate formulation of these items, because for some items you like put age or education or something. Just put income, not higher personal income. Why higher? Because it makes you thinking again from the beginning that the higher income, the more they would receive the gifts. But I don't see the clear logic here. I mean, it's a bit doubting. I would expect the other way around. If a female especially has lower income, then she would more receive, more ready to have some sex relations. I don't know, but I mean, otherwise you should explain why you're putting exactly. And the same the family value, because it was vice versa for me. If I have big family values, I would not do it for just sex for money. But I would expect this. If people have more higher family values, like children values, I don't know how do you measure exactly family values, what exactly the question was, because it's also important. And then we are coming to the regressions. I can just suggest you to have more, how to say it, detailed discussion after, or just having a look at more details, because there are some points that really multicolorate at the same time, and especially I didn't get it about the number of dates in the past. How was it formulated? Just
you mean why it was relevant and how we interpret it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And because, so you see, yeah, some variables like I didn't get it when you put it sex and men paying on the date, for example, or financial issue and personal income. How does they correlate? Because maybe you pick up the same, and actually you have too many variables to such a small sample. I would say just concentrate on something less, because you have too many variables here, and some of them are really, how to say it, controversial to each other, or they mean the same. But we need to clear them later. If, of course, you are willing to change some results. I don't know.
Of course.
Yeah. And actually about the last issue about the homosexuals and heterosexuals, and how did you actually measure this? This is also a very interesting question. How would people react? Do you believe that they honestly answered, or did you ask what exactly the question was? How often you do, or have you ever do this, or what type of orientation you are? What was the question?
Okay.
Then that's more or less okay, but it's really nice paper, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the thorough comments and questions. Maybe I respond to a couple of them now, especially the ones that were more questions. The other ones I take down in order to just simply correct. Why higher income? Our expectation was one based on development of economic culture, and that making people more materialistic, essentially. And so it's about spread of economic logic, and I guess we could point to a number of theorists, whether it's Habermas or another one, and it's the idea that people come to calculate more and more and try to essentially the idea of spreading profit logic into relationships becomes more and more normal if a person is already wealthy and has this logic in their minds, if that makes sense.
So you mean, but you need to test it whether he was before that poor or wealthy, or if he already is wealthy and the source of the income is exactly dating.
Yeah, that's what we don't know. We don't know.
Of course it will.
We don't know if it's
itself.
a chicken or the egg effect. In fact, we find people with higher incomes are more likely. It does match the hypothesis which we have, and would be against other hypotheses which would assume, well, the poor are more likely. But we still don't know if it's if in fact poor people are more likely to receive, and through that they become wealthier, or if wealthy people are more likely to receive gifts and just maintaining the standard. So you're right, in terms of causality, it's really hard to track down. I expected family values to function in the way that you mentioned. Family values equal some sort of collective values, which means maybe anti-materialist, but in fact we found the opposite. And the way that we would explain it is by referring to some of this, I would say, feminist literature, which talks also about, and also Marxist literature, which talks about the origin of the family as economic, and it's about power and control and resource inequalities between husband and wife. So it could be explained that way as well. The number of one-night stands, I need to explain that better in the text, what the idea was. But the essential idea was that, well, if a person is more sexually liberated in some dimensions, meaning sex becomes removed from marriage and it becomes removed from long-term relationships even. Maybe sexual liberation is just directly linked to this type of behavior. So that's what we were trying to measure there. I have to think about your suggestion about paying on a date. We have the one variable, whether who is it normal, for whom is it normal to pay on a date? The man, the woman, both? Depends. We were trying to measure gender expectations in relation to resources there. In terms of whether finances are important, this had less for us to do with gender and more to do with just economic logic at large, and we were hoping to differentiate between the two. But you're right, I should check and see if they interact, and if they do, then it could be a problem. Maybe there's a way to combine them. And how, did you ask also how was it measured, the homosexuality, heterosexuality? It was a preference question. So it wasn't, have you ever, it was more like, what is your sexual preference, men, women? In fact, this is an interesting question as well, because most of even my survey team and the people we were working with, they tried to kick this question out several times. Somehow the people I was working with were all embarrassed to ask this question. They said, "Oh, no one will ever want to answer it."
Propaganda of homosexuality.
Yeah, well, this was even beforehand, though. It's interesting that culturally they thought, "Oh, you cannot ask a person this question." But I was thinking, how can you ask a sexual survey and not ask this question? I thought it must be important. But that's how we tried to measure it. Yeah. Thanks again.
So I think that we are open to the floor of questions. First of all, maybe from St. Petersburg.
We need a microphone.
Yes, can I?
Yes, please.
Okay. I have a question as to how you explain the fact that higher status women are more likely to receive gifts. Is it simply because in their social circles there is more wealth circulating, so there is something to give, whereas in lower class situations, people may not much to give, or they're simply too greedy to give. Or is there another more complex explanation that you favor?
I already had a puzzle, and now I have an even bigger one thanks to your third explanation. But no, which is great. I don't know. Maybe there's another variable we could bring into the mix in order to try to see. We do have a question about the person's material well-being during childhood. So maybe we could use that in order to sort of compare and whether there's upward mobility or not. Maybe we could somehow use materialist values in connection. We could use materialist values in order to test my hypothesis that it has to deal with economic logic. I don't know. It worked out in the direction we were expecting, but you're right. There's a whole lot of explanations for it, and that's another possible one. That maybe receivers are hanging out with other people of similar economic status, and therefore there's more gifts to be given. Okay, thanks.
Any questions? Yeah.
I think, one comment and one question. Two questions. The first one, you don't have any city controls. Also, in the end of your presentation, you mentioned that perhaps your findings reveal the level of social economic difference between two cities. But still, how do you think, can your findings be affected, difference between Moscow, Kiev and Minsk, by any potential difference in gender balance? So we know that sexual liberalization may be affected by gender imbalance. For instance, when women exceed men, like female exceeds male, for instance, after Great Wars. So women have to compete for males, and so it may lead to some liberalization. So it's question about potential gender imbalances. And the second one is, from evolution biology theory perspective, what you revealed is quite common thing. For instance, if you look on the National Geographic Channel, like a tough competition of males who females. They fight until death, but the winner gets as much females as possible. So that in the animals world, so the only criteria for success is your possibility to have as many partners as possible, just to transfer your genes. And this state is often extrapolated into, like, say, human society, when the rich males everywhere across the time used to have as much partners as possible, and the poor often have no. Like, even, for instance, even we know that in Muslim societies, men officially may have like up to 4 wives, but in the real world, only like a small share of men may afford that, and often in many cases, the poor men have no. For instance, last week we had a talk in Egypt, and we saw that a lot of young men were like the driving force of this right. And our suggestion was that also because of that. And so my question would be that given that idea that, say, the poor men always want to have more women, and they do that at the expense of the poor men, and moreover that women often tend to, they often agree to be, let's say, the fourth wife of a successful rich guy than to be like the first wife of the poor guy, so they tend to marry upwards. So does your finding reflect the difference in social inequality in these cities, that the rich men, they just exploit their status, and for them to have like more partners is just a symbol of their prestige? So that's like quite a complex question. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions. Hold on. Yeah, the first question, gender balance between cities. Well, first of all, demographically, I think the gender balance actually is among the people who are most often compensated dating, which is older people. That's the first point, which would support your statement. But on the other hand, I would suppose, maybe I'm completely wrong, and I really don't know about this, but I would suppose that the World War II resulting gender imbalance in Minsk would be relatively the same as in Moscow and Kiev. Maybe I'm wrong there. And so that's something I could look at. If the same gender imbalance is in all 3 cities, but we see more compensated dating in Moscow, then that could strengthen more cultural arguments as well, which that's an excellent way to take a look at that. Your second question is very interesting. I'll handle the more social dimensions first. Well, essentially, rich guys get more is the argument being made, and there's kind of a naturalist dimension to this. I don't know if you find, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know if you find exactly the same in all societies to the same extent. And I'm thinking of Sweden or Germany, which I know much better, and there is patriarchy there as well, and there's a lot of gender inequalities, and there also is gender, but it's less materially expressed, and it's less acceptable to express gender through economic dominance. For example, you can find this in how daters will split the bill and things like this, right? And so I would suspect that this cross-cultural difference might question some of the naturalism inherent in what you're saying. But on the other hand, yeah, of course, we find in nature men tend to be displaying for females, and then females are selecting the man, and perhaps income is just simply one of the ways that in human societies we're doing this. This makes a lot of sense, but I think there's a limit to this argumentation in humans as well, which comes from evolutionary biology, and that's in relation to looking at, for example, gorilla species or other apes compared to humans or chimps. There's the issue of sexual dimorphism, difference in body sizes, and you can find that when the difference in body sizes is greatest in almost any species, then when the males are bigger than the females, in other words, then men tend to have harems. And for example, gorillas are gigantic, and this one gorilla male will have access to all the females, and all other men will have no access whatsoever. And this is found as kind of a rule of thumb in this field. And the interesting thing about humans, there is sexual dimorphism, but not a lot, and a little bit. And the suggestion that is made there, based on the literature that I've read, is that human beings, if we would follow this logic, should not be 100% monogamous, but we're mostly so. And so certainly this harem-type society that you find in gorillas or in other species would not be to the same extent in humans if we would follow simply this biological logic. But it is an interesting question.
Any other questions? Yeah. Maybe we can collect all the questions from St. Petersburg and then do the same in Moscow, and then you can react, because otherwise it will be...
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure this is a good idea, but I'll share it anyway. You're using the unification term in probably more of a labor understanding, but I think you could also try using it in a Marxist understanding, because there's quite a lot of literature, like leftist literature and also feminist literature, on how body is being commodified and how body is basically the good that people started to trade. So you could also argue that sex was not liberated from love, but it was rather enslaved by the market. And I think these things that you described perfectly fit this. All these theories, Marxist and feminist theories. So I think you could just add a little bit of them, like maybe some old theories like Fromm, who writes some books on love, and maybe some modern feminist critics. I can't really name any authors, but there should be definitely.
Thanks a lot, actually. That gives me a chance to... Oh, you wanted to collect, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay. Please.
Yeah, I have a comment. I think the theory of economic exchange and codification of relationships does not fit for explanation of the dating contemporary Russia. First of all, compensated dating exists in the Soviet Union. It's not new phenomenon. Yes, it was common practice according to many relationships. And we can say about exchange only in the case when sex is necessary only for men, but sex is necessary for both. And if you say about terms of exchange, we have to admit that as a result of exchange, women got sex as gifts, and men got only sex and lose money. Yes, it's not equal exchange. It's not explain the phenomenon. I advise you to look for the causes of compensated dating in gender order of Soviet Union and post-Soviet Russia, yes, and other countries. It was specific gender order, and maybe if we understand it, we understand the phenomenon.
Thank you.
Some more questions from...
No, we don't have more questions.
Okay. Shall we collect all the questions here, and then you can just pick up whatever you want to ask?
Sure, yeah. Perfect.
So any question, because I think that we have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Just wait a second, we will start from Anna.
Okay, I have three.
Please loudly.
Yeah, because some people will also
In your
need
paper
to
you
hear.
declare that you chosen free cities because of their differences in economic situation. But there is no description of economic situation in these cities. I think it is necessary to describe some statistics. And I think that maybe there is a contradiction, because at the end of your paper you come to the conclusion that in Moscow people are more materialistic. That is not economic situation. That is specific values in Moscow. This is the first moment. The second you have the table 7 differences in male gift given as compensation for intimate relationships by age. I think it is very interesting to describe gender differences in receiving and giving. Is receiving is exclusively a male women phenomenon, or maybe now it is under progress, and now, for instance, yes, males can receive gifts, as well as females can give gifts. And maybe as a second step, you can divide your sample into 2 groups, males and females. And then you can run your regressions in 2 groups in order to understand what is the differences.
Yeah, I just want to add to the previous question. Difference between cities also should be described in terms of difference in incomes between male and female parts of the society, because actually it could be interesting to see if the difference is bigger, yeah, between in incomes between males and females, will it lead to the results that we have in the last table. That's it.
Any other questions?
Okay. Thank you for...
No, we have
Oh, we have
more
oh, yeah,
from
sure,
Alexei
sure.
and
Yeah, okay,
from...
we got it, yeah.
I'm just putting the mic here.
I kind of missed the beginning of this extremely interesting talk. So, the main question is, what is the main hypothesis? What is, is there a null hypothesis, or is it just exploratory analysis?
Okay.
That's probably the main question. And the second one is that, how do you maybe it was answered already, but how do you expect to deal with response bias? Would it make sense to do some kind of a list, maybe some kind of a list?
What type of response bias?
Well, so, well, did the questionnaire include the questions like whether or not the respondent has received gifts for sex?
Yeah.
Why would, probably there would be, I can easily expect people not answering those questions.
Okay.
And there might be ways around it.
Sure. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris, for a very interesting talk. I have several comments and questions. First of all, it seems that probably we can explain a bit more using